Hey friends, it's Miss Gadino here. It has been so much fun to learn all about poetry this week. I was so proud of all the work I was seeing yesterday when we worked on visualizing poems. It was so cool to see all of your drawings and what you saw in the poem as you were reading and visualizing. So today is Thursday, April 16th, 2020, and I'm going to introduce today's lesson and show you today's activity. So yesterday we learned how to visualize a poem while we read it. Today we will learn to notice repeated lines in a poem. A poet uses repeated lines for a reason. Sometimes it is to give the poem rhythm or flow. Other times it is to show what is important in a poem. So we've already done some work with repeated lines before in stories, so I think you guys are going to do an incredible job on this today. So today I'm going to read this really cool poem by Jack Prelutsky, and it's a poem that I really enjoy, and I know we've read some in class that are really funny. So you're going to watch me today. I will highlight repeated lines or phrases that I notice in the poem. So a line goes across. A phrase is kind of short and sweet, so it might not be a whole line, it might be 2 or 3 words. So let's look to see if we notice any repeated lines or phrases as we read the poem, Louder Than a Clap of Thunder. Louder than a clap of thunder, louder than an eagle screams, louder than a dragon blunders or a dozen football teams, louder than a 4-alarmer or a rushing waterfall, louder than a knight in armor jumping from a 10-foot wall, louder than an earthquake rumbles, louder than a tidal wave, louder than an ogre grumbles as he stumbles through his cave, louder than stampeding cattle, louder than a cannon roars, louder than a giant's rattle. That's how loud my father snores. That was kind of funny at the end. So I was wondering what the poet was talking about, what was louder than all of these different things. So that was pretty cool to read the ending. So I don't know about you, but I noticed a repeating phrase in this poem over and over again. And those were the 2 words, louder than. I wonder if you guys agree with me. So what you're going to do is just watch me as I highlight all of the times that the poet included the phrase louder than. It's a lot. Louder than an eagle screams. Louder than a dragon blunders. Oh my goodness, this is like already so many times this poet has put louder than into the poem. Louder than an ogre grumbles. Louder than a cannon roars. Louder than a giant's rattle. Wow. Oh, and there's even one in the title. So I noticed that the poet used the phrase louder than multiple times in this poem. So now that we've noticed what the repeated phrase or line is in a poem, not only do good poets and good readers notice what's repeating, they also think about why the poet put those repeated phrases. Now that if you guys want to start to write your own poetry, it's kind of cool to look at what a poet does because you can actually use that in your poetry too. So now you're going to watch me. I will think about why the poet included the repeated lines or phrases. Then I'll answer the questions below. So when you guys get to a slide that looks like this, you can reread the poem to yourself. And as you reread it, I want you to think about this time, why did the poet put this repeated phrase, louder than? Oh, I even missed one underlined there. There's even more. So I'm going to reread it to you guys one more time. Louder than a clap of thunder. As I read this time, I want you guys to think about, why did the poet keep saying louder than? Louder than a clap of thunder, louder than an eagle screams, louder than a dragon blunders or a dozen football teams, louder than a four-alarmer or a rushing waterfall, louder than a knight of armor jumping from a 10-foot wall, louder than an earthquake rumbles, louder than a tidal wave, louder than an ogre grumbles as he stumbles through his cave, louder than stampeding cattle, louder than a cannon roars, louder than a giant's rattle. That's how loud my father snores. So when she says louder than, I don't know if this is a boy or a girl. I know Jack Perletsky wrote the poem, but the speaker, I'm not sure if they're a boy or girl. But when the speaker says louder than over and over, I know than is a comparing word, so I'm wondering, like, what is she or he saying is louder than all of these things? So I'm really starting to think about that and thinking about what do I know about the poem. So let's try to answer the questions. Number 1, why is the speaker using the repeated phrase louder than in the poem? Let's look at our 3 choices. A, to tell how loud thunder is. Okay, well, let's look back. I remember it talking about thunder, and that's in the title too. But poems are a lot different than stories and nonfiction text. Sometimes the title doesn't really give it away. We really just have to read and think about it through a poet's mind. Louder than a clap of thunder. Well, it is kind of talking about thunder, but down here it says louder than a dragon blunders or a dozen football teams. That's not really talking about how loud thunder is. I don't think that's what the point of this poem is. I'm not really sure. B, to compare how loud her father's snores are to other loud things. Well, she did say that's how loud my father snores. She is saying her father snores louder than all of these different things. Her father snores louder than a tidal wave, louder than an ogre grumbles. So it might be B. Let's look at C. To show how loud different things can be. Well, it is saying all these different things are loud, but really I think the poet and the speaker is using the phrase louder than to show that her father snores louder than all of these different things. So I think that B is the best answer choice. Let's look at number 2. According to the poem, what is one thing the speaker said her father's snores were louder than? All right, let's see. A, a dozen football teams. B, a giraffe. C, a fireworks show. I know a fireworks show is loud, but as I look back through the poem, I don't see her saying that her father's snores are louder than a fireworks show, so it can't be C. I don't see it in there talking about a giraffe either. Or a dozen football teams. Well, it doesn't say louder than a dozen football teams, so maybe I need to go read the line before it. Louder than a dragon blunders or a dozen football teams. Oh, there we go. That makes sense. So now I really understand why the poet used the phrase louder than. Now it's going to be your turn today. So if you're doing it in Google Classroom, if that's how your teacher wants you to do it, you'll just go to the next slide here and you're going to read the poem and you're going to notice the repeated lines or phrases that I've highlighted. So I've already highlighted the phrases for you here, but your job is going to read a gray day. I wonder why it has a question mark. You're going to read that poem to yourself, and then you're going to go to the next slide. Notice the repeated lines I've highlighted. Go to the next slide, and here you'll see the poem once more. On the next slide, you're going to reread and think about why the poet repeats the line or phrase. So I see a line repeating, and your job is going to be to answer your 2 questions. Okay, that's if you're doing it in Google Classroom. If you're doing it in a discussion board, your teacher will have it linked below. So you'll need to go back to your eClass page and go to your discussion board if that's what your teacher wants you to do. So I'm so excited, and I know your teachers are excited to see what you guys know. And I hope you have fun reading A Gray Day and you enjoy noticing the repeated lines and thinking about why the poet put the repeated lines in the poem. I'll see you guys later.